Hey everybody, Stephen Fick from Davenport European Martial Arts School. We got a question on our YouTube channel from Kyle Rowling about the grips for one-handed swords, whether that is a messer, an arming sword, a side sword, a Viking sword, any of those. So that's what I want to go into today. And we're going to start off with the Viking sword. We have done videos in the past with the grip on the Viking sword, as well as some work with the sword and shield. But today what I'd like to do is really focus on the grip. When we start talking about the grip, I want you to understand there are two things that your hand does. It can either close the fingers to the palm or the thumb to the fingers. You have the choice of how you manipulate your grip. When most of us are training, our natural inclination is to want to close the thumb to the fingers, and that does this. But if I close my thumb to my index finger, the tendons that connect at the back of my hand here come up my arm and connect to the front of my shoulder. The tendons on the pinky and ring finger come down off the back of my hand on the back side of my arm and connect to my shoulder. So I actually have a better grip with my pinky and ring finger due to physiology than I do with my index finger and thumb. And we'll see this primarily pinky dominant grip in many arts. Understanding that I can either close my thumb to my fingers means I use the front of my shoulder, or if I close my fingers to my palm, I'm now using the back of my shoulder. Because I can close my fingers that way, that means I can also open my fingers that way and use different musculature. If I'm holding it here and I pull with my pinky and ring finger, that opens up my hand this way. And that'll give me the option to put my thumb on the back of the handle, or if I start here and then I close my fingers, it allows me to twist my sword so that I get this angle with my quillin, puts my false edge quillin, the cross, over my index finger knuckle. That means even with a sword with a cross this small, I can still protect my index finger. If I only close my thumb to my index finger, that means I'm stuck in this hammer grip. Don't get me wrong, the hammer grip has its time, but it's not the only grip. And we want to be able to shift between the grips. So a good way to practice this. I'm going to start in a hammer grip, but what I want you to notice is I'm not holding it because that's as far as my sword moves. I have kind of a relaxed grip, and you can see the space in here. So with that, because I'm not holding it tight, because I haven't hit anything yet, I can close my fingers to my palm, and that changes the orientation of my sword. That means that if I'm coming from this side, I can lead with my false edge. If I'm striking from this side, I get my true edge. But I can also cover this way with my true edge into a quick rotation. And this is where I would open my hand to the hammer grip for a straight drive cut through. So I have this ability to use my fingers to shift my grip to where I need to move. If you're holding your sword too tight, you don't have choices. And really, everything in the fight is about the choice that you make. From the Viking era sword, the migration era sword, we're going to go to the messer. In one of my previous videos about the Viking sword and shield, somebody had asked, hey, wait a minute, haven't I seen pictures of the thumb on the back of the blade in messer techniques in manuscripts? The answer is yes. This is primarily associated with the German tradition, but it's not just the German tradition. Everybody in Europe was interacting, and they were constantly learning and evolving in their techniques. So we're going to see this kind of thing in a lot of different styles, a lot of different swords, because ultimately we are all bipedal humanoid creatures who move in the same general way, even though there are going to be differences due to history, physique, age, injury. In the big picture, we all move the same way. When I'm fighting with the messer, I want to keep my thumb towards the back of the blade like this, but what I want you to notice, it's not flat. So I'm not holding it straight across like this. It's actually at about a 45-degree angle. This is important for us because this means that when I am holding it here, I've got a good angle with my cross, with my edge for deflections, and I'm not going hard 90-degree edge on edge, which is going to destroy my sword. However, destroying my sword is much better than getting hit in the head or the arm or something. So it's a trade I'm willing to make. But if I can train myself to not risk my edge, even better. But because I have this 45-degree angle, I've got all my defense like stated, but when I extend, what that does is that puts my cross right in line with my arm, and it puts my whole hand going across the handle. So when I'm hitting, I'm able to really drive through with the force of my structure, because here, as I'm striking, I'm able to put my whole hand on it, and when I extend, it's all a straight line coming right up into my shoulder, which translates directly into my foot. Whether I'm stepping forward or I'm stepping out, I've got this line that puts my cross in line with the structure. Remember, using the sword is not just about hitting somebody. Any monkey can swing a stick. If I'm swinging it correctly, I'm using my structure, not my muscle. Because no matter how good you are, how fit you are, how young you are, eventually your muscles are going to give out. Your structure, your bones will not, and if they're broken, swinging your sword is one of the last things you're going to be thinking about at that moment in time. So this position here allows me to line up my structure and keep this through here. But that also means that I can just turn my hand over and I've got a nice line of coverage. Drop my elbow, and now I can use my false edge, my edge right here. And we see this technique in Talhofer and others where they're stepping out and striking to the wrist with that false edge. If, however, I'm holding it like a hammer and I do that, you'll notice I'm hitting with my flat. It's only when I'm holding it at this 45-degree angle that my edge comes into play. Another thing to think about gripping the sword, whatever style of sword you're using, the way our hands are built, the thumb is the weakest point of my grip. We see this in every martial art. Handshakes, lapel grabs go through the thumb because that is the weakest grip. If I hold my sword like a hammer, so it's my edge is straight forward and straight back, what that means is my cross is actually, if I follow that line, inside my arm and going against my thumb. So it turns, and then it's just going to rip through the thumb. This feels like a strong grip, but what it really does is it weakens your structure and puts your weakest joint as the only thing between holding your sword and not holding your sword. holding it at this 45-degree angle, puts it into my hand. Now everything is behind it, so it's not going to get knocked out as easily of my hand. From there, we're going to move into the arming sword. Now, this sword traditionally would be used with a shield or something like that. I could use it on its own, but when we look at paintings from Agincourt in the early 15th century, when they're using this style of sword, often it's with a shield, transitional armor. They're short, they're stubby, they're meant for finding the gaps in armor, as well as having a good striking surface for unarmored or lightly armored opponents. The sharp point gives me control. The length means I can put it where I want to be. If I'm holding this sword in a hammer grip, again, we talked about how the quillin is no longer in line with my arm and it's going through the weakest joint of my hand. If I'm holding in this position and I try to stab, what I want you to notice is when I stab straight forward, it drifts off to my left side. There are no straight lines in nature. Your shoulder joint is a ball joint, which means it moves circular. Even though I'm stabbing forward, I'm still, because of the structure of my shoulder, drifting to one side or the other. If I'm stabbing from my left side, my point drifts towards my right. If I'm stabbing from my right side, my point drifts to my left. It cannot go in a straight line in this grip. However, if I turn it to this other grip that has that slight angle, again, it's not 90. I am not putting my thumb directly in the fuller. I'm keeping it just to the side of the fuller. With this grip, now, because it runs in line with my forearm, not with my shoulder, now I can stab in a straight line. So whether I'm driving down, up, from the angles, I'm able to move and hit the target I so choose directly in front of me and providing my coverage the whole time. If I hold it at 90 degrees and I get hit here, you can see how it just pushes right through my thumb. That's going to dislocate or break my thumb. I have seen that happen in tournaments. You don't want to hold it flat because then again, everything's going against the weakest joint of your grip. But if you hold it at 45 degrees and I get pushed down, it's now, if it's going to yield, it's going to yield this way and roll out of my thumb, which means I can come back and reset my grip. Even if I get hit hard, I can use that as momentum to turn my sword over. When I'm holding in this grip, I want to be able to cover in front of my body on all sides, and again, not at 90 degrees, because that takes all the force of their edge directly onto my edge. I want a high angle deflection. It still puts my edge in the way. There is none of this block with the flat. It's a high angle edge deflection. It might look like flat, but it's not. And we see this angle in Delaberry's manuscript. We see it in Talhofer. We see it in Meyer. This is not a novel concept. This is documented in the manuscripts. What is not done is it's not specifically written about in the manuscripts. Because why would they tell you how to hold your sword? You should already know how to do that. We, in the 21st century, don't have that training that started early. So we have to go against what our eyes tell us and learn to listen to our physiology. And that brings us to one last sword that I want to talk about this grip with, and the motion of your fingers, whether you're closing or opening your fingers from your palm or your thumb to your palm. And that's with the side sword. spada da filo or spada da lato. This sword is different in the others in that I have a complex hilt, and this part right here is called the ricasso. With this style of sword, when I grip it, I actually put my finger around the ricasso. A mistake that a lot of people make in the grip of this sword is that they put their finger all the way around it and they try to lock it in position. And you can see how deep my finger sits into this guard. The problem with this is that I did the same thing with my quillins. It's no longer in line with my arm. It comes inside my arm. So the grip of this sword is not deep like this, but actually just kind of rests your finger right on the edge of the ricasso, the fingertip of your index finger right on the edge, and your thumb. I have a thumb ring. I love my thumb rings. I use them. I put them on any sword that it's appropriate because these are wonderful tools. But I can use my thumb ring or just on the flat of my blade, and look what that does to my sword again. This gives me that same angle. When I am using my sword, I've got here this is called high hanging inside guard. I can open my fingers like we were talking about earlier, drop my elbow down, and now it looks like I'm coming from my left side to my right side, but simply by closing my fingers, I change the angle of my blade to go from my right to my left. In the Italian tradition, this is called a mandritto. Man means hand, dritto means right. This is a right hand cut. And I can develop that with my fingers. If I don't close my fingers tight, I just pull my elbow down and then close my fingers here. Now it's a reverso because it's from my left side. From my right side, you can see my fingers open, close my fingers, there's my right, my mandritto. From my left, still opening and closing my fingers gives me the ability to move my point around. This means that I'm going to use my finger on the ricasso to help support it, but then I don't need to grip it as much. When you're holding onto your sword, I want you to think of the grip on your sword just like you would think about throwing a punch. If I'm throwing a punch at my opponent, I'm relaxed until contact. I don't want to tense up here because that's going to make everything hard to move. It's going to slow me down and it's going to detract from any force I might be able to impart to my target. So I stay loose until contact. The same is true with my sword. I'm loose until contact. Whether it's me contacting their body or I'm contacting their sword to stop it. If I'm just setting it through and redirecting it, I don't need to grip it. It's only when I want to stop it or take the force that I tighten up. So there we have grips on the one-handed sword. Whether it's a Viking style sword, an arming sword, a messer, or a side sword. We're going to see the similarities. There will be slight differences depending on the length and thickness of the cross or the complexity of the hilt, but I have to practice closing my fingers to my palm or my thumb to my fingers. I need to be able to do both. And when you're gripping the sword in this way, I want to make one last note about this grip. When you're gripping the sword in this way, your middle finger is always on your handle. You're rotating between your ring finger and middle finger. You're rotating between your pinky and ring finger and your index finger and thumb. So we want to learn to do this kind of action with our hand and this kind of action with our hand, as well as this kind of action with our hand. That is going to give us the greatest flexibility in our grip. Thanks a lot for the question, Kyle. I hope this helped. If you liked what you saw today, please share around this video. Tell everybody about it. We're closing in to 1,500 subscribers. Please help me get to 2,000. Hit the subscribe button and the notification button, and you'll see more videos like this soon. Thanks everybody, and take care.